New Jersey Republican Congressman Scott Garrett isn't blaming Democrats or the White House for our money mess. He's pointing the finger at his own party. Plus, who's to blame for the reckless spending and borrowing in Washington? Everyone deserves some blame. But my next guest is a Republican who was most troubled by the reckless behavior of those in his own party. Here to explain, New Jersey Republican Congressman Scott Garrett. Congressman Garrett, it's a pleasure. Welcome here.
Always good to be with you.
Yeah, you and I are friends and neighbors. You're my own congressman.
Indeed.
But I appreciate
you live in a good district, then.
Yes, we do. Beautiful northwestern New Jersey. There was a very interesting event that occurred on the floor of the House of Representatives last week.
Right.
The president's budget was not being voted on. One being pushed by your colleague, Congressman Paul Ryan, was. This would have required the government to borrow a lot more money in order to cut some money in the future.
Right.
One was being pushed by yours, a far more fiscally conservative,
Sure.
far less borrowing, far sooner balancing of the budget. Why did his win and yours lose?
I don't know. I guess because we didn't get the message out that what the American public really wants in a budget is that it balances, and it balances within our lifetime. So what we did was, our budget was really the Republican Study Committee's budget, and that's the conservative wing, if you will, of the Republican Party in conference. We always put out a budget. It came right before Paul's. And we got originally 122 votes, but as you know, some shenanigans, they dropped down to 119. But our budget, in the end, would have actually balanced the budget within the window 8 years from now.
The shenanigans were pulled by some Democrats who decided either not to vote or to vote present, to do something such that the number for victory would be reduced. And this caused the Republican leadership to scramble to get people to vote against something they probably believed in, which was yours.
Indeed, yeah. So when I voted very early, since it was my bill,
right.
and I was watching the tote bill up there going up, and I say, we're winning, this is really great. And just as soon as I voted, a Democrat came over to me and said, you know, Scott, you may win this thing, which sort of had me guessing, why would a Democrat think that we would win it?
I don't want to get you in trouble with your colleagues, but is the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives seriously committed to eradicating debt? Or, stated differently, as seriously as the 119 of your colleagues who voted for your legislation are?
Well, sure. So the budget that finally passed, the Ryan budget, and I'm the vice chair of that committee as well, is a budget that will rein in debt, will cut over $6 trillion over the next 10 years, will deal with entitlements, not within the 10-year window, but later on. So it does a lot of good things. We just said maybe we should just do those things a little sooner.
What are we to do about the $14.3 trillion debt that we're facing? Can we conscionably continue to borrow money, or should we draw the line now? Should we take the approach of your libertarian colleagues in the House that we should not borrow any more money no matter what, that the president's job is to run the government and pay service the debt on the basis of what he collects from the IRS and other sources?
That's a good question, and that's why you're hearing all the outrage or the uproar that right now when the debt limit vote comes up, what would happen if we didn't raise the debt limit? And of course they'll say the markets will collapse, the world will collapse as well because we're not being good on our debt. What we're saying is, well, if you're going to raise the debt limit, that's certainly an option. Shouldn't we get some guarantees going forward that we're not going to simply find ourselves in a situation 6 months or a year from now?
What would the guarantees be? Because as I understand it, and of course you know this better than I, one Congress cannot bind another. I mean, your budget or Paul Ryan's budget could be for the next 10 years. The president's could be for the next 10 years. Another Congress will come in and change it. So unless we actually say it is unlawful for the Treasury to sell debt, how can we bind a future Congress? How can we rely on a promise from anybody?
Actually, and you know this. Of course, Jefferson wanted to do that, right? Jefferson said we should not allow Congresses to be able to do any debt because he thought it was immoral to put the obligations that you and I incur onto our children and our grandchildren. But that's probably not going to happen. So there's a couple things real quickly you can do. You can make constitutional limitations in the future. You can do a balanced budget amendment. You can put limitations on the size of spending in the future, limited to a percentage of the GDP. So you can do those things. Secondly, you can do statutory changes. You're right, statutory changes can change in the future Congresses, but you can put limitations in statute and you can put rule changes.
All right, so if a balanced budget is off the table, either for economic reasons or political reasons, it didn't survive a filibuster in the Senate. What could the president possibly give the conservatives in the House of Representatives to induce them to go along with letting him borrow more money?
Well, first of all, I don't know, a balanced budget is not necessarily off the table because that's still being talked about. We would want him to guarantee us that we would get the votes in the Senate. The second thing is on statutorily, we could do more than what's in Ryan's budget right now.
How?
Look, The president's proposal, you would actually increase spending in 2012 by around $90 billion, 2.8%. In Ryan's budget for 2012, just the year we're going into, you actually cut spending by how much? About only $89 billion for the first year, 2.89%. The RSC budget we talked about before cuts spending by how much? $300 billion. So one thing you could say is if we want to raise it that much, we want to cut
We only have a few seconds.
Sure.
Is it inevitable that the debt ceiling will go up, no matter how trustworthy libertarians are to their belief in sound money?
I think that just about everyone in Washington believes that if we don't raise the debt and put some protections in beforehand, that would be a bad situation.
Congressman Scott Garrett from beautiful Garden State, New Jersey, thanks for joining us.